Hello and welcome everyone to Witches Reclaiming the Round Table Global Online Summit. This new wave of witches and sorcerers are returning home to our ancient source. This summit is opening sacred space for the witches to take our seat once again beside the knights of the Round Table, inviting the witches back onto center stage where we belong to sing our sacred soul songs once again. This summit is a grand reclamation of the rising of the deep witch gnosis that is so vital and needed now to support this continued creation of the golden age. And I am your host, Eimear Stassin, and I am very excited to welcome today's expert speaker, Elizabeth Dillon Bercovici. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you because it's a swapping of roles here, isn't it? I've been on the other side being interviewed by you for several of your summits. So it's wonderful to swap roles for a moment.
I know. I thought that this morning. I was like, oh my God, like the shoe is on the other foot.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm just so excited because I just feel like there's so much that wants to come through today for your audience to really kind of shift them into that wizard consciousness and the energy of Merlin. But I'll let you keep going.
That's amazing. Amazing. I'll say a few words about you, Elizabeth, to introduce you to our audience. Elizabeth is a mythic storyteller, intuitive healer, writing coach, new paradigm teacher, and conduit for higher energies. She's a catalyst for soul growth and helps people heal on a deep level through channeled activations and vortex healing, a special form of divine magic through the Merlin lineage. She is also the host of 4 magical storytelling virtual summits, including Fearless and Fairies and Fairy Tales. These were immersive experiences exploring the goddess Bridget, the Morrigan, the Fae, mythic storytelling, and Celtic lore. Oh yes. Elizabeth has an MFA in creative writing from Emerson College and a BA in English literature from Skidmore College. She has published 2 books, a children's book called The Fairy and the Firefly, and a handbook about herbal medicine entitled The Energetic Apothecary. She loves to help people with writing, storytelling, and birthing creative projects. And her great gift is igniting the soul fire in others so they can step into their power, their purpose, their creativity, and their greatness. How beautiful. Welcome, Elizabeth. It is so gorgeous to read about you, having known you for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. And your title today is The Lore, Enchantment, and the Magic of Merlin.
I know it's funny when that came through. At first, it was just going to be the magic of Merlin. And then the other 2 words crept in. It was like lore, enchantment. And I realized I was like, okay, I got to just surrender. So yes, in the process of preparing for this, I have definitely been really going hard, like searching for different lore. I almost feel like the lore, it almost has a life of its own. And when it's forgotten, it's just waiting to be remembered. It's like, it's never truly gone. It's just waiting for the right people to hear it again. And so I feel like this summit is a moment where the lore of the past finally comes full circle.
How gorgeous. How gorgeous. And what wants to be remembered then or revealed about the lore of Merlin?
Oh, yes. So there's a bunch of stuff I can say about Merlin. But it's interesting because when I was sitting with what wanted to come through, I was getting a little bit of a channeled message. I said, Merlin, what do you want me to say about you? How do you want me to introduce you? And, he said, like, I am here to enlighten, instruct, and teach. My wisdom is that of the earth. My wisdom is that of the sky. My wisdom is that of primal knowing. I am Merlin. I am the wisdom keeper of the elements that make up our world, for with them, all magic is possible. So that was what came through. I was like, oh, I got to share this. So it's funny. So one of the things that when I spent a long time connecting with Merlin, and I want to say that My first initiation in this lifetime to Merlin is actually my vortex healing lineage. And when I was younger, I'm also a Reiki master, and I became a Reiki master, and I thought my journey as an energy healer was over. And then a month later, I heard about this thing called vortex healing. I didn't even know what it was, but it just so happened that the week the training was being offered, this was the foundational training, was the same week I had off from work, and a flux of money came in at the exact moment, which was right, like exactly what I needed. And I said, okay, I'm not even going to question this. I'm just going to do it. And so I go into the first day of this energy healing class thinking it's going to be a lot like Reiki. And my teacher on literally the first second she closes the door, she's just like, okay, good morning, wizards. And I was just like, what have I gotten myself into? And so I didn't realize till that moment that it was a lineage that was like passed down from Merlin himself. And it was very interesting, like the lore of this, the vortex lineage. It actually goes back a long time. And this is a story that many people will not be familiar with. But there was actually an avatar in India named Mahindra. And this was thousands of years ago. And, in Mahindra's lifetime, he did many great miracles, many great things. And then, he passed on. Fast forward about like 1,000 years later, there was another wise man in England. And he was sitting meditating beneath a tree. And all of a sudden, the spirit came to him and basically said, do you want to know the ways of enlightenment? Do you want to know the ways of magic? And this wise man in Britain, sitting under the tree said, yes, I do. And so this spirit of the great avatar Mahindra came through, and he showed this wise man, all of these secrets of creation, all of these secrets of magic. And it was interesting that man in England actually became what we call the first Merlin. So a lot of times when we think of Merlin, we think of one man, and that is the Merlin of Arthurian myth and lore. However, according to what I have learned, that Merlin was actually the fifth in the lineage. So a lot of times when you'll hear stories of Merlin, there's a story of a Merlin that, he went mad after a battle and he spent the rest of his life in the woods in solitude. And there's another Merlin who was a seer and, prophesied great things to many kings. And it's almost like, and people say, look, that's why there are all so many different myths and legends, because this couldn't all have been one person. And that's the truth, because there was a series of them. They were all of the same lineage. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Arthurian Merlin in a second, but I want to say that in very, very old times, when this first Merlin, who received the initiation from the avatar, when he first received initiation, he started doing very magical things. And in that time, there was a word that was basically meant magical transformation. And that word was Merlin. So when this wizard, would go and work his magic, the people would go, oh, that's a Merlin. Because for them, it was something so magical, this act of magical transformation right before their eyes. So that ancient word ended up becoming the title. And so that was the first Merlin in the lineage. And as the lineage progressed, there was greater and greater power and greater wisdom in the lineage itself. And it's funny, it's almost like the lineage chooses you, this great wizard lineage. And I want to talk right now about the Arthurian Merlin. And I want to describe that from a very, very young age, this being was chosen in a sense. So there was another great king in Merlin's time. This was before Arthur. And this great king's name was King Vortigern. And there's a place in Wales. This is like a place that's still like existing today. It's called Dinas Emrys. And so King Vortigern kept trying to build his castle there. And he built and he built and he built. And at the end of every day, the castle walls would collapse. And he would call everyone he knew, like all of his servants, everyone in the kingdom. Why is my castle collapsing? Because it was like clockwork. He would have like all the people come throughout the day to build it up with all the mortar and all, everything to build it up. And they would go home for the day. And every morning they would return and the castle had crumbled. And so, Merlin at this point was actually 7 years old and not connected to Vortigern. But Vortigern approached a soothsayer and said, I need to know why this is happening. The soothsayer said, you must find someone who has no mortal father. You must spill his blood over the mortar, and then your castle will no longer crumble. So they go and find this boy, the 7-year-old boy, Merlin. And Merlin at this point is already wise beyond all measure. And he takes one look at Vortigern, 7-year-old kid, and it's just like, you think spilling my blood is going to stop your problem? It's like, please. And Vortigern is intrigued because no one has ever spoken to him like this, let alone a child. And he says, well, then what do you suggest? And Merlin goes into this state, this prophetic state, and he sees beneath the castle are these 2 dragons, and they have been fighting each other for thousands of years. And there's a red dragon and a white dragon. And he says, you must go, dig up the castle, dig up the ground, and unearth, at this point they're sleeping, unearth the sleeping dragons and let them finish their fight. Then you can build your castle. And so they, Vortigern at this point is, and the way that Merlin speaks, he has the force of God, all of the power is already there within him. And so he's like, do what the boy says. So they do what the boy says. They literally like pull, rock upon rock, and they get to almost like, it feels like hundreds of feet down into the earth. And there they find the 2 sleeping dragons, the red and the white. And the second that the rock is removed, the 2 begin their fierce battle. The red dragon is the winner and the white dragon ends up running off. So if you have seen like the flag of Wales, you will recognize that is the red dragon. That is the story. That's where it comes from. Wow. So I wanted to say that is the Arthurian. That is like the big guy on the block, the Arthurian Merlin. And I just wanted to just kind of make a clarification, because like I said, there are some stories like the Merlin who was mad, who was in the woods. These are different Merlins. And this Merlin of Arthurian lore, I don't know how to explain, like there is something very extraordinary, very, very special about him.
Wow.
I was like, there's a lot of information.
It's so beautiful and such a sacred way that you share the story, starting with the words, your channeling of Merlin in the very beginning. Like it's really, really powerful. His voice through you, and then sharing the 5th version of Merlin as a title. And it strikes me when you say Merlin meaning magical transformation, and Merlin, how similar to miracle it
yes
is, Yeah. And I was wondering, I don't know if you want to go into this, but vortex healing, because it's not something I've heard of before, but the Cailleach witch, who we've spoken about before in your summits, has in recent weeks has shown me the water, the cauldron, the vortex, the whirlpool. And it's like this magical watery portal. And you're talking about vortex healing. And I wonder, did you want to share more of that?
I can share more about that. I think what's coming through when you're talking about the cauldron, I really wanted to tell you about this beautiful enchantress, Caradwyn, later in our talk today. So she is the enchantress who presides over the great cauldron of inspiration. So I definitely want to go more into that. But in terms of vortex healing, I think like the reason it's called vortex healing is because of, it's like the appearance of the energy itself. And so vortex healing, I can say very briefly, it's an energy healing lineage, but the deeper you get into it, the more you encounter true magic. So it's interesting. There's even later in the lineage, there's a transmission called pure magic, and you're channeling like magic from like the heart of magic itself. So this is a much higher level transmission, but it's interesting because so the ideals of the vortex healing lineage are that a lot of us are in, we think that we're making free will choices, but a lot of our choices come from our conditioning and our programming. So vortex healing is enabling, like it's, a series of, you would have a lot of different sessions to clear different issues. And the issues are preventing you from being in your divine truth. So, you're just clearing that out. And I know that we do this, witches do this, priestesses do this. We're basically just clearing out the vessel so you can be the pure embodiment of the source energy that you really are. So I just found, like, in my own personal transformation, that vortex healing has gone very, very deeply, getting levels of conditioning that nothing else could touch. And so one thing about vortex healing, and this is also very connected to Merlin, is that there is it's divine light and consciousness. So it's, the energy is healing you, but there's also divine consciousness. And that's what knows exactly where to go with you. And so it's very interesting because you can still work with Merlin, even if you're not in the vortex healing lineage. So when you are working with Merlin other ways, there are a lot of inner world journeys, and you can do a lot of different guided meditations, or you can go into those kinds of transcendent states yourself, and you can travel. Again, like, it doesn't matter like what lineage you're at, like you can still connect with Merlin, and you can go to Merlin's healing pool, Merlin's observatory. There are so many places you can go. And when you're on the threshold of the Arthurian mysteries, Merlin is the guide you must connect with before you go any further. So to really connect with these beings, like you can connect with Arthur, you can connect with Guinevere, you can connect with Morgane Le Fay, but Merlin is the threshold guardian. And he is the wise mentor, and he can kind of be, at times he can be hard to connect with, but you have to be persistent with him. And I feel like we even see that in all the legends and all the stories of Merlin. It's that, he's not outwardly just like, I am, full, open-hearted, warm and friendly. You've got to show your stuff, for Merlin, to teach you all of his secrets. So I wanted to just say, if you want to do any kinds of Arthurian magic, one of the most basic ways is really to work with Merlin in meditation. And you can actually use the round table. This is connecting to us here today. You can use the round table, in your meditations with Merlin. And so a lot of times, sorry, I'm talking a lot here, but oh, thank you. So in meditation, so of course, like when we look at the round table, it's round. So there's an infinity that's happening. And a lot of times in we don't really talk about this so much in all the modern versions of the Merlin and Arthurian legends that we watch and we read, but this was actually a mirror of the cosmos. So it's like we would look up. So when you're actually doing Arthurian magic, when you're working with Merlin, you're not just calling in the elements of the earthly plane. You are calling in all of the stars. And this harkens to the power of words. So I could call in the starry beings above, but then again, I'm kind of speaking vaguely, and there's power in name. So if I can call on like Alpha Centauri, if I can call on Cassiopeia, if I can name the stars, that's actually when they can truly show up in my world, when they can truly bring their energy, to the magic, to the rituals that I am here creating. And a lot of the rituals, when you're working with the round table, when you're calling in the stars and the cosmos, the part of the magic that happens, there are a couple things. But one is there is a change in consciousness. So these beings that you're calling in, you can, call in like different stars. You can call in the fae, different fairy kind. And what's happening is you are shifting your consciousness to what was. You are shifting your consciousness to the way that we used to experience reality. Because now we're in this very, very 3D, very dense experience, but that's after many thousands of years. Part of the mystery of Merlin, and actually the energy of Avalon, is that we are being called to remember the old frequencies. It's not just the old ways, the old frequencies, so we can attune to them. Because the frequency, when I used to hear about Avalon, I only really knew it through stories and myth. And this past summer, I actually was in Avalon. I think it was like 2 weeks. I was called there, and I was telling Eimear a little bit about this before we started recording. But I actually got the call to go to Avalon, and it was February 2020, and it just came through. It was so funny. I had this really heartbreaking experience, and like romantic, heartbreaking experience. And I suddenly thought, if I had never met this person, if my life was totally my own, what would I do? And this voice came through, and the voice was, I would go to Avalon. And I was like, what? Because I am someone, when I was younger, I taught English for a year in China. I traveled through Southeast Asia. And I was like, Avalon, like nowhere, like more exotic. And it was so funny, but it was very clear I would go to Avalon. And so that weekend, I just spent it was like 48 hours looking up everything I could about the Glastonbury area, Avalon. And I was like, okay, well, that was nice. And I didn't know what possessed me so. And then there was someone who's, I was on their email list that Monday. There was an email that went out. Do you want to go to Avalon? And I was just like, okay, that's it. And it was one of those rare moments. I used all of my savings to book this trip. I didn't even really need to know much about it. I just knew I'm supposed to be there. Little did I know, a month later, a pandemic would really go into high swing. The world would shut down. And I was so confused. I was like, I'm supposed to go to Avalon. And the thing though, is it was 2.5 years from the time that I first signed up to the time that I got there. But I really feel like this is the moment where we're needing to start to connect in with the realm of Avalon again. And so when I got there, it was funny. I was telling people I'm going to Avalon. And at first I told everyone I was going to Glastonbury. And then I noticed there's a subtle shift in my consciousness. Suddenly I started telling people I'm going to Avalon. And when I got there, I was 7 days in this group of women, but it was it wasn't even the workshop that I went to. It was that there was a new thing that I was experiencing, which I realized by the end of the week was that I had entered into sacred remembrance of the frequency of Avalon, of this realm, and it was ready to come back. So the way that I see this, and I've actually had some confirmation from this, actually one of the teachers in the vortex healing lineage was recently approached 3 or 4 weeks ago by a queen of Avalon. And she said, there's work that you have to do for me. And this, one of the teachers of the vortex healing lineage, there are 6 teachers in this lineage. It's not a very large lineage. It's rather small. But one of the teachers is a real seer, and she approached him, was like, there is more you have to do. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And apparently what she wanted was for him to help, with the help of the vortex healing lineage, to bring the realm of Avalon and our earthly plane closer together again. So there are different tools and techniques that, I've learned in the lineage that will help bring us closer. And that's kind of what we've been doing for the last few weeks in the lineage. But it's interesting because this Queen of Avalon came forward and said, now is the time. So I really feel like it's no coincidence that you're having, this summit right now. Literally this connection with the Queen of Avalon is happening. I think we're going to finish bringing the realm more closely together on November 4th. So it's just very interesting. That's also the day that your summit starts.
The day before we start on the 5th.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I was like this. So it's just very, very interesting because the realms were far away. So it's we could encounter Avalon through stories. And there would be, I think, a sacred remembrance in our collective consciousness. There would be even a sacred remembrance in the soul. So that's what we would get listening to stories, watching movies. But now the realms are going to be closer together than they have been in several thousand years. So that's why we have, a renewed capacity to connect with Avalon on a level that we have not been able to for many lifetimes. So when you are, I don't know, this is a whole tangent, but when you're engaging with the frequency, the energy of Avalon, it's the land of apples. It is true peace. It's described as a place that there are no farmers. There's the land itself, it's self-sustained. there are apple trees and grape trees, and it's almost like a version of Eden. And it's just very interesting because you would think of that as something from a fairy tale. And this is the moment where we say, I mean, Avalon in some respects is a fairy realm, but it's that moment where we realize the fairy tale is real. The fairy tale is real. And like, just because most of us in our human experience, I would say, up to the last few years, I feel like, we've had to kind of remember our magic, like we were kind of under that veil of forgetting, thinking, oh, the world is it's a hard kind of place. And now the magic is asking to be remembered. And there are so many stories, for example, like Lord of the Rings, where like the elves go off, the magic leaves the world. And it's like, it's leaving, it appears almost like it's never going to return. And, there's several stories like that. And I really feel like that's an old narrative. That's an old narrative. And the new narrative is what's happening right now. The magic is returning because it must. So I just feel like a lot of people's magical capacity, magical abilities are going to be heightened and online in a way that we haven't experienced before, because we are fully reclaiming it. And not just are we reclaiming it, but our skills, our capacity is increasing.
Amazing. And the fairy tale is real. When you said those words, just I could feel my whole being opening up. There's so much beauty and healing to that as well. And then the old frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And Avalon, could you share more about them? So you speak of like Eden and paradise was coming to me.
Yes.
It really sounds like that. But could you share more about these?
It was honestly this experience of such like supreme peace, such that I had never known before. And it was peace, but it was this nourishing peace. And it was funny because I was when I was in Glastonbury, I was staying kind of at like a retreat center that was in the middle of nowhere. And I felt it was funny, like I paid all this money and I was staying in, it was literally the middle of nowhere, surrounded just like, there were like cows and sheep everywhere. And I was staying in this little tiny thing called Cowshed 5. And it was funny, and I had no phone reception. I was literally like, it was a blast from the past. So it was funny because, I grew up in that time period where like, I remember the world like before computers. I remember that era. And so it was so funny that I was forcibly brought back there. So I want to like speak to that in a sense, because I think part of what enabled me to really move into full receptivity of Avalon was unfortunately the lack of technology. It was like, and at first I was like, why are my guides doing this? Don't they know I run a business. I need this. And then I realized that it was like, there is something so much more sacred happening. There is something so much more sacred at play. And so I finally had to surrender the technology, and it opened to this very rustic experience of being in nature. And it was just this, I almost felt like it was this warm, like it was like I was being embraced by the divine, embraced by this energy that was pure nourishment. And it was just interesting because, and yet in that, there was something that it was like just a little tiny hint of enchantment, but more than that, it almost felt like if you're underwater for a long time, and then all of a sudden, you break the surface, then you breathe. It's like, and the air is so fresh, and it's like you're breathing real life. And no longer are you on like, I kind of feel like a lot of us are on like the hamster wheel. We're like going from one thing to another. And we have forgotten in some ways what it means to live life with a capital L, to really be fully, embodied in this magical experience of being here on the planet at this time. And I feel like when I entered, so Avalon is a place that you can consciously intend to connect with. And there's a lot of peace that comes through. It's just serenity on the deepest level of your being. And I also I was going to share a little bit about one of the maidens. I'm trying to see if I can find this. Okay. So I also wanted to kind of dispel some of the, because I know today we're supposed to talk about lore. And one of the things that really came through as I was preparing for our conversation today was Morgane Le Fay. I really felt her like wanting to come through. And it's interesting because I knew this is the witches reclaiming the round table. And the whole thing with Morgane Le Fay is that she is seen in many different circles as this villainous, like, this villainous half sister of King Arthur who betrays him. There are legends that, she seduces his knights. There are legends, that she, is like, has poisonous hatred of Guinevere. It's like there's so many different stories. And I want to just kind of briefly share some of the first time, Morgane Le Fay ever appears in literature. And that's this very old text, written by, Geoffrey of Monmouth around like 1100. And it's called the Vita Merlini. And that translates into the life of Merlin. And I could tell you more about that text itself. It's very, very old. But one of these, part of the Vita Merlini, there is the bard, the ancient storyteller Taliesin, trying to Merlin in this story has gone mad. He's experienced just so much that he's lost himself. And Taliesin is trying to tell him all these stories to remind him who he is so he can come back to himself. And so he tells, and part of why Merlin has gone mad in the story is everything that happened with Arthur. And he's like, because, Arthur, dies, according to legend. I think it's the Battle of Cumla. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but that's the battle where he's killed by Mordred, who in many legends is his son. So this is the way that, Taliesin is, trying to bring Merlin back, back to himself. And he's talking about Avalon, where they left Arthur at the end of his days. And he says, the Isle of Apples, which men call the Fortunate Isle, gets its name from the fact that it produces all things itself. There, 9 sisters rule by a pleasing set of laws. She who is the first of them is the most skilled in the healing arts and excels her sisters in the beauty of her person. Morgan is her name. And she has learned what useful properties all the herbs contain so that she can cure sick bodies. She also knows an art by which to change her shape. And I just want to go on a little bit in the story. So this is the first time we ever see a reference to Morgane Le Fay. We see her as of her 9 sisters. These are like queens of Avalon. They are the protectresses of Avalon. She is the most skilled. And it's the way that he speaks about her is with love and with reverence. And, and so Arthur is brought to her, when he's got this fatal wound and he's brought to her in Avalon. And I want to just read a little bit more. Morgan received him with fitting honor, and in her chamber she placed the king on a golden bed, and with her own hand she uncovered his honorable wound and gazed at it for a long time. At length, she said that health could be restored to him if he stayed with her for a long time and made use of her healing art. Rejoicing, therefore, we entrusted the king to her, and returning our sails, came home. So I wanted to just share that because that is the first time that we ever see mention of Morgane Le Fay. And that is her as the greatest healer of them all, trusted above all else, to heal their dying king. And I want to just also make a note that there's so many stories. I feel like the myths have become twisted over time. And that's the whole thing is, so the battle, with Arthur and Mordred becomes even more gruesome. And here, this is the whole thing is that Arthur doesn't truly die. So of course, that's part of the mystery. We don't know what happens to him. But one of the other aspects of the Arthurian legends that we're not really diving into as much as we could right now is the element of fairy. And there are many modern scholars that have come to see Guinevere as a fairy queen. So in this sense, Morgane Le Fay is also connected to the Fae. That's why Morgane Le Fay. So it's these fairy realms. And so this marriage of Arthur and Guinevere is seen as the marriage between the human and fairy realms. So this connection. And so the fairy realms, That's the whole thing, is they used to be much closer together to where we are now. But it's just very, very interesting because we at one point were in deep trust and connection with with these enchanted realms, with this magic that was just part of the natural order of the world. So I just wanted to kind of weave that in as, as something that was also an undercurrent of this story.
Yes, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. And when you speak of the 9 queens of Avalon and Morgan Le Fay, I'm sure I read somewhere, my mind is going to Edinburgh Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And before the castle was there, I'm sure I read it, or maybe I channeled it, that there was a temple that was guarded and served by 9 maidens, and there's an association with Morgan Le Fay there. So I wonder, and the extinct volcano is called Arthur's Seat. So there is an association with King Arthur and of course the witches. And it's just interesting. That's where my mind was going as you were sharing that.
Yes, and the reason I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was also looking up, there are a couple different mentions of 9 maidens. And it's funny because a later one, oh my God, this is so like, we had that one that I just read to you. But then there's another one in the this ancient Welsh text, the Mabinogion. It's called it's like Peridor, son of Efka. I feel bad for anyone who is Welsh. I am so sorry. But in this version of the story, these are like 9 witches that, basically they're evil, they're dark, and Arthur has to go, and they find the witches, him and his knights, and they show them no mercy. So it's interesting. That's a later tale. And I wanted to bring that up because I was seeing the evolution of the 9. And that's why I also brought up Morgane Le Fay, because we just saw the first time she is mentioned, she is all light. And then as the years progressed, that's when she became, the villain. That's when she became the one who betrayed Arthur. It's like, so the original stories do not actually contain that information. It's only like us in the years that have followed, because there has been a lot of, I feel like, kind of, we know this poison against magical women, a lot of poison. And when you first came to me with this, the witches reclaiming the round table, I really had to think of, what does that mean? And one of the things that kind of came through for me was honor. And it's like the idea of being at the round table, it's a round table of pure equality. So it's like everyone at this table is equal, but it's also a table of higher ideals. And, for so long, I think for the last century, we've been, healing from the witch wound. And now it's almost time for us to put that aside, and to reclaim the seat at the round table means to come from a place of pure divinity. Like we are in our purest essence of divinity. And more than that, it's like we deserve honor. That's the whole thing, is that's what I feel like when I was trying to tune in with what the witches wanted me to say. It was that the round table was a place of true honor. And that after all of the legends, after all of the many years, that's actually what they wanted above all else. So it's just, that's the kind of thing is I wanted to share briefly. I wrote, got so many things here. So one of this is actually it's from an old movie called Dragonheart, and it's the Knight's Code, the chivalric Arthurian code that I think that this is actually channeled the guy who wrote this. And again, like this is the male energy we're talking about here. But he says, a knight is sworn to valor. His heart knows only virtue. His blade defends the helpless. His might upholds the weak. His word speaks only truth. And I just wanted to just share that with you, because like we're seeing these higher ideals. And that's actually when you are doing like Arthurian magic, when you are connecting through these inner mysteries with Merlin, with Arthur, with Guinevere. And when you call them in, you will feel their presence. You will feel their power. It is unmistakable. But it's this kind of thing where I feel like for a long time, the witches like were in the shadows and they were seen as dark. They were seen as evil. And this is again, well, it's obviously it's propaganda, but this is the moment where we are coming back into like the witches reclaiming the round table is the witches reclaiming valor, honor, is them. It's not just them reclaiming it because they've had that in their hearts, but it's others recognizing them in that light. And so that's something I wanted to share. It's because in this modern world, I feel like there's a lot of disenchantment. There's a lot of disenchantment. And I think, we see like all these, sad things that happen. And it's like, well, how could the world be a wonderful, beautiful, magical place? And, part of why someone like King Arthur showed up was he was like establishing like these, ideals of chivalry, these ideals of what it means to be a human being. And, we forgot those, we let them fall by the wayside. And as human beings, we can make the active choice every day to live by a higher code, to live by higher ideals. And a lot of people will say, well, that other person does this bad thing and they get away with it, but a knight would never. And so I feel like this is the moment where we can choose whether male or female to step into this code of valor. And like this, what I just read to you is an oath that this knight in the movie, in the film Dragonheart, takes every day. And it's like, if we can come every day and make this oath to be in full integrity and make this oath to be fully in valor, in courage, I feel like the world will be a very different place. And I also just want to say this, what's coming through is that when you make that, again, like the word is valor. I had a quote about valor. I want to see if I can find it quickly. Valor is stability, not of legs and arms, but of courage and the soul. And I wanted to just share that. I'm going to read it one more time because I love it so much. Valor is stability, not of legs and arms, but of courage and the soul. And every day that you pledge yourself to those ideals, you are pledging yourself to the principles of King Arthur and the code of Camelot. And so that's the kind of question, is where in my life can I show up with true valor?
Amazing. Amazing. And it's that, the reclamation, I love how you describe that. And yeah, it's so magical. And I was thinking back to the vision in this healing session that I had last November of reclaiming the round table. And what I saw was that the knights are waiting, these divine knights that are filled with valor and magic and chivalry and all these words that you've been sharing, and they're waiting for us. They're waiting for those who feel their witchiness, their divinity, their sovereignty. There's so much space at this round table for all of us to step forth when we feel that courage that you spoke of as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time.
Yeah, no, I love that you're saying that you saw that in the vision, because I feel like it's long since time.
Of course.
And we're like, it's really time now.
Yeah, because up until that point, I was very, as you know, like it's been very much about the witches healing, the witches rising. And now it's like, hey, hello, there's mentally, I'll know there's another part, there's a masculine and feminine, of course. But when the knights arrived, it's like, wow, yeah, we're all in this together, and they're all part of each one of us as well.
Yes, no, absolutely. I love that. And one that's also very interesting is that, again, the knights also kind of, their tales were also perverted over time, because if you look at the early tales, there's much greater chivalry. It's as like the consciousness of the storytellers. Because I love storytellers more than anyone, but it's like, but you could see that their consciousness, like they wanted drama, they wanted war, they, makes for a good story. Yeah. But it's originally like the knights were at such a great level of integrity. And I feel like our politicians of the world, if we just look upon these examples of the past, it would be a very different place. And that's the whole thing, is I think that we have to remember these ideals and challenge those who say those ideals are a fantasy, because we can choose them every day. And I love what you're saying. The knights are just waiting to be remembered, because the reason they haven't left is because they were still going to be needed. That's the whole thing. Is I feel like they knew there's also a prophecy of Merlin where this kind of time was foretold, this kind of time of great, I want to say, like a lot of people being asleep, and that's part of why I feel like the knights came to you in that vision, was because you were supposed to help people remember them. That's the whole thing, is because once we remember them, we can interact with their consciousness. Once we connect with them, they can teach us the wisdom we most need to learn.
Wow. Yes. And I had to remember them within myself first. Mm-hmm. And I love how you've been part of that story, because it was you, was that a couple of years ago we were speaking and you were saying, oh, you need to watch Merlin, the series.
Yes.
Was that 2 years ago? And myself and my son, he's now 11, we watched all the series. I think there were 5 series of Merlin on Netflix. And it was so magical. So you've been such a beautiful guide in that along the way, in how this comes into reality in everyday life.
Yes. That was actually another message that was coming through. I'm so glad that you said that, because when I was like really sitting with what wanted to come through, one of the phrases I heard was magic is here now. And the reason that was important is because a lot of times when people do magic, they kind of do it in the sense of manifestation. They'll cast a sacred circle, they'll call in all the guides, and they're like, I want this thing, I want this new relationship. I want this new, it's this thing that they're trying to create in the outer 3D world. And while I do believe that does happen, you do call certain things in. The magic is like, can we bring enchantment to every day? Can we bring that magic? That's the whole thing. Is it's not about what's happening 5 years from now, even 1 year from now. It's that we bring that magic and weave it into everyday life. That's kind of what I wanted to really say, because a lot of times people get disenchanted and disconnected from the magic of the world because they say, this thing that I wanted hasn't come yet. And we think the magic is somewhere out there in the future. And so I really invite you to find ways of bringing enchantment back into your life. And when I was, Eimear, thank you. Because when you said, what do you want to talk about? I didn't even know, enchantment was one of the things I was supposed to talk about until, you're asked me about the conversation. And what came through is that each and every single person, there's almost there's a line. It's almost kind of like a rope that someone is thrown when they're in the ocean to bring them back to the shore. And this is your line back to enchantment. And so it's for every person to kind of decide what brings them into that space. And so for me, I love this movie when I was a child called Hook. It's with Robin Williams. And it's actually, grown-up Peter Pan has to go back to Neverland. And the man who composed the score, it's John Williams, who I think he also did Harry Potter, Star Wars. And there's something about the music for Hook that I can be having the worst day. I can be so disconnected from my sovereignty, from everything. And if I just hear those notes, they bring me back. And I just feel like that's kind of the invitation to everyone who is listening, is to find what is your lifeline to enchantment. And I think a lot of times we find enchantment in stories. We can find them in movies and in books. And that's part of why I think we go to them, because we're trying to find ways of bringing enchantment into daily life. But I feel like there are all different practices. And one of the things that I wanted to say, instead of just, looking to find ways that life can enchant you, is that you actually become the enchanter or the enchantress. And I was going to suggest this is for those of you who are brave, is singing. Because if we look at, all the different stories, if we look at Greek mythology, we see the sirens who would lure the sailors to them with their voices. And so I know we're probably over time, but one of the things that I also do a lot of work with is word magic. And there are a couple different beings I work with, but one is the goddess Caradwen. And there is, I'm not sure, do I have time for the Caradwen story?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so let me take a sip of water.
We have to talk about Caradwen.
Okay, I'm so glad. I was like, what's my timing?
Loads of time.
Perfect. Okay, so many of you may be familiar with Caradwyn as like she who tends this great cauldron, and it's the cauldron of inspiration. And I wanted to share, a little bit about where that cauldron comes from, because it's actually a very ancient bardic tale. So once upon a time, many thousand years ago, there was Caradwyn, this great enchantress, and she had a son whose name was Afgu. And she was very distressed because to her mind, her son Afgu was the ugliest man in all of the kingdom. and, and his looks ailed her so that she determined that she would create a potion. And this potion would make her son Afgu the wisest man in all of the land, so that his bad looks would be overlooked. And so she set about to gathering these magical herbs, great sorceress that she was. And she hired a servant to stir this cauldron for a year and a day. And this was a special potion that was supposed to brew, true inspiration. And, it was very, very carefully tended for a year and a day. There were two servants who were stirring this cauldron for Caradwyn, and one was a young boy named Gwion Bach. And so it was that the cauldron had finally brewed this magnificent potion, this potion of wisdom, genius, inspiration. And Gwion Bach went to go get a spoonful of the potion for Caradwyn to smell. And as he went, he tripped. He tripped, and the potion went on his fingers, burning the small boy's finger. So without thinking, as most people do, he put his finger in his mouth to quell the pain. Instantly, he was imbued with all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge of time and space and the cosmos. Caradwyn looked at him, furious, because apparently all of the most concentrated magic was in that one drop. Actually, it was 3 drops. There was 3 drops, all of which, the young boy Gwion Bach had now taken in. And so Caradwyn looks at him with this otherworldly rage that this thing has been taken from her son. And Gwion Bach, now full of all this wisdom, realizes, I have to get away from her. I have to get this woman wants to kill me. So he basically turns into a hare and he runs away. And he runs and runs. And Caradwyn, great enchantress that she is, looks and says, oh no, he doesn't think that he can outschool me. So she transforms into a greyhound and chases after him across the land. So Gwion Bach, still in his rabbit form, is like, oh my God, she's gaining on me. I didn't think to turn into a greyhound. Okay, I cannot run her on land. I'm going to go into the ocean. So he finds it's a small, stretch of the sea, and he jumps in and turns into a salmon. And he's like, the salmon, she's never going to get me in here. So, he's swimming up the stream in his little salmon form. Caradwyn looks and says, oh my God, does he really think he can outsmart me by going in there? So she transforms into an otter and goes downstream chasing this poor little salmon. Gwion Bach swims and swims as fast as he can, realizing, though, that he cannot outswim her. He cannot get away from her in the water. He realizes land has not worked, sea has not worked. I must take to the skies. So in this moment, he turns into a wren and he goes up into the sky. He says, she won't get me up here. She's down there. And he flies as fast as he can. And of course, Caradwyn, in this moment, transforms into an eagle. And the two are engaged in this epic chase that seems to last for all eternity. Finally, Gwion Bach realizes that it's all for naught, and he cannot outrun this great eagle in the sky. So he goes back on land, and he transforms into a seed, a tiny, tiny seed. And he burrows down deep into the earth, thinking, there, at last I have done it. She will not find me here. Except that Caradwyn, in her wisdom, knows the exact creature she needs to transform into in order to get this seed. And so she transforms into a black hen, and she uses her little beak. and she does everything she can, and she hems and haws. And finally, she gets this seed in her mouth, in her beak, and she eats it. And she's like, that's it. That will teach you to mess with me. So she eats the seed thinking that she's won. And for a little while she has. She turns back into her human form, wondering if she should make another potion. Until a few days later, she realizes there's something brewing inside of her. And that something is, of course, like Guion Bach, now reborn as her son. So she has to go through the 9 months of carrying Guion Bach, and he's born all over again. And this is the moment where he comes from her as Taliesin. And Taliesin is the master bard known as the twice born. And this is why. So Taliesin, like when he comes through, he still has all of the wisdom, all of the knowing, that, he experienced from those 3 drops of potion. So Caradwyn sends him on his way. She's like, you've been together with me for 9 months. I'm not going to kill you, but just go. It's like, and so then he goes, and that's why it's actually funny. I started today's conversation sharing the Vita Merlini, which is the story of Merlin, but it's actually Taliesin. So Merlin and Taliesin were friends. So Taliesin, when he grows up, is friends with Merlin, and Taliesin is the one in that story bringing Merlin back to himself. So it's very interesting, but I share that story. So that magical potion that Caradwyn was brewing is called the Potion of Inspiration, and it's filled with what I call Awen. And so Awen is divine. It's like, it is magic. Awen is the divine source of pure magic. And this is a special kind of magic that anyone can learn to work with. And this will make you eloquent beyond your wildest dreams. This will make your words flow like the river. And if you really want to enchant people, think of how, young men used to court women. Like they would have like the most beautiful poems in all the land, and they would go and recite the poetry to bring them in. So this is the kind of thing that like you are in the enchantment. When you step into that role of enchantment, most of it is done through the voice, through the music of words. And so I share that story because you can call upon Caradwyn, you can call upon Taliesin. And I actually have a daily practice of calling in Awen. And I usually call it in, I usually do it almost like a mantra 3 times. And you'll notice it's like if you go like, Awen, it becomes very musical, and it literally takes you to another world. So like even the word itself, it actually is connected. It's like, means like holy breath. So this is something that if you're wanting to, to bring more enchantment, into your life, and you want to be the vessel of enchantment, you can learn to practice word magic with Caradwyn. And you can do this literally just by calling her in. I do a lot of writing and storytelling with people. So I will call Caradwyn in before I write, before I tell stories. And you'll notice that if you call in Taliesin, there's a different energy. But it's very interesting because even though in this story, one is the mother, one is the son, they very much, it is that completion, masculine and feminine. There is that wholeness, and that's why it's often really good to work with the 2 of them together.
Wow, what a beautiful story. So gorgeous. And your voice is so beautiful as well.
Thank you. I was like, hopefully I'm doing a good job telling the story. But I also wanted to say about Caradwyn is that she was really rescued by the witches, because in ancient, in Wales, there actually was originally no word for magic, because magic was just, enchantment was just part of daily reality. And it wasn't until it was there. So there was actually no word for witch in the original Welsh language. It was only when there was all like, the witch burnings and the trials that like that word came in from English. And that was the first time that they started looking at these women who were magical as bad. And so the word that first came through was more of that energy of someone who was a hag, someone who was, ugly, and like it was interesting how it was like this kind of this is again the power of words for bad. it's like the power, like that's the whole thing is before then, for thousands of years, there was no judgment. There was nothing but love for women who could practice true enchantment, And so it's funny, the witches, so the bards lost. So I just want to say a little bit about the bardic history is that people worked with Ceridwen for a very, very long time until Christianity really swept over. And once Christianity took over, people would work with the Holy Spirit. They wouldn't work with Ceridwen so much. So Ceridwen was lost, and she was really reclaimed by the witches of the last 100 years, who really felt energetically connected to her and her big simmering cauldron of inspiration. The cauldron is also one of transformation, so it's interesting that it ties into what we were talking about earlier with Merlin, magical transformation. So when we're looking at magic, it's creation itself, it's transformation, it's so many different things. And the last thing I wanted to say, I mean, I'm sure there's more, but I know we're like coming up on time, is that I feel like the magic that we are able to do in the world is going to be increasing. Because a lot of times when we see like Harry Potter or Merlin, we see very vivid displays of magic that's kind of hard to match in our 3D reality. But I just feel like the force of magic on our planet is becoming stronger. And so that's why they're all different beings you can connect with. You can connect with Merlin, with Taliesin, with Ceridwen, with Morgane Le Fay, or even, like I said, if you want to connect with Fairy Queen, connect with Guinevere. There are so many beings we can connect with to come into our magic. And I feel like it's very helpful to actually start to connect with all of them because they each have something unique to teach us. And that is the secret of fully coming into the Arthurian mysteries, is learning the magic and the wisdom of each of these beings and coming into relationship with it.
So powerful, so powerful. And I feel, when you say there's power in the name and naming these magical beings, and I feel a lot of similarities with the Cailleach witch as well, and Ceridwen, as you speak about her too. Wow, it's been so amazing, such a beautiful sharing, so much wisdom and deep knowledge that you hold and impart to us. So thank you so much.
That was my pleasure. When you invited me, I was like, that's it. I got to show up.
I love it.
My lore.
And I'll put links where people can connect with you. Is there anything that you have coming up that you'd like to invite people into? And also there'll be your free gift, which I know you're preparing as well.
Yes. So my free gift is actually called Magic with Merlin. And so it's a meditation to connect with Merlin and also to go on a little visit to the Isle of Avalon. And this kind of came through because I mentioned in the beginning of today's call that, Merlin, had the prophecy for Vortigern with the two dragons. But one of the other things he saw this huge doorway, this kind of etheric doorway. And there was the face of the goddess on the other side of the door and the door closing. And so this was Merlin prophesying the door closing on the goddess for 2,000 years. Oh. And so at the time, nobody understood what he was talking about because goddess lore, everyone worshiped the goddess. And the prophecy didn't make any sense, but it does now in retrospect. So this is a meditation for us I mean, we're all doing it anyway, to open the door once again. And in a lot of different magical rituals, you'll see this image in different magical rituals, and Merlin stands at the threshold. He stands at the door, guarding it. And I feel like this is the moment that we open the door. Again, it's the goddess, it's the masculine, it's all of it together. And I just really feel like we have the opportunity in this, this is my hope for you in this free gift, to embody, you are the wizard, you are the goddess, you are the magic. And this is a sacred meditation to help you shift into that. Actually, before we go, I actually feel called to share a couple stories about the land of Glastonbury itself. So I just like to tell 2 news stories, if that's okay, before we finish here today. It's interesting when we look at magic in the regular 3D world. If you go to Glastonbury, there are actually 2 sacred springs, and one is the red spring and one is the white spring. And when you go to the red spring, it's these beautiful gardens. And I remember when I was there was a storyteller, and I wondered, how did this sacred spring, how did this stay preserved after all these years? And, she said it's actually really funny about, I think it was half a century ago or more, there was a very rich, wealthy investor who wanted, to buy these gardens and use them, to build like a big apartment complex. And the person who had been holding them for however many years, passed on, so they were up for auction. And everyone was worried because nobody in town had as much money as this big investor. And so it was the morning of the auction, and everyone is like, oh my God, the sacred site, it's been, like, we preserved this for thousands of years, what are we going to do? That guy's train broke down the morning of the auction. He was on his way, everything stopped, he couldn't, he was too far away, he couldn't walk, he couldn't get to the auction. And I love this story because this is part of the magic of Avalon, is that Avalon calls you. So, Avalon is, when you go to Avalon, it's because you're being called to step fully into your power. And so Avalon protects itself. And so I love this story because a lot of times, we think of magic as something that only happens on the inner planes, but this is showing you magic happening in real time. And so I just thought that was really, really beautiful. And actually I have close by, this is actually, I don't know if you guys can see, this is the Chalicewell Garden. This is the sacred place with the red spring. And that was the place that was protected that day.
So gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I'm so glad that this space, this sacred space, was and is protected.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of connection when it comes to Avalon with a Joseph or Matthias, who was the uncle of Jesus. And so it's interesting. So originally, actually, the round table that we think of is, according to some legends, is not the only round table. There are actually 3 of them. So the first round table is the one that Jesus sat at the Last Supper. The second round table is the one that, Joseph or Matthias, he actually had this vessel that, that contained the blood of Christ. And this is what many of us would call the Holy Grail. And, once, Joseph or Matthias, once, he left, Jerusalem after the crucifixion, he had, several people with him. And it was interesting because after a certain point in time, he put this vessel, in front of, I think there were 24 people there. And he put the vessel down in front of them. Only half could see it. So it's interesting. So even in this moment, we're seeing the separation of the worlds. Those who are more attuned to these higher dimensions, these inner planes, they could see the grail in front of them. The others, it was like they were looking at nothing, just empty air. And so this is really this moment of the split. And so the 12 that went with Joseph or Matthias, they really became the grail keepers. They became the grail keepers, and they continued with him. So there was a place when I was in Avalon called Wariel Hill. And I thought this was really interesting, this place, because, you see it, it's like this kind of, it used to be an island, and Joseph or Matthias saw it in the distance, and they were so weary coming as they did, all the way from Jerusalem. And when they got there, they basically just collapsed in the land. They're like, oh, we made it. That's why it's Wariel Hill, because they were so weary. And so there was, Joseph had a staff, and at the top of the staff was the crown of thorns. And so when he was so exhausted, the staff fell on the ground, and right there, a thorn bush, was basically from the seed, suddenly became a fully fledged thorn bush in a matter of moments. And so this is a very, very sacred place in Avalon. And I wanted to just share this very briefly, because it's really interesting about the magic being in the land. So this was this, site, Wariel Hill, was very special for a very, very long time. And it's funny because this is similar to, there are several stories like this in Avalon, but, fast forward, to our modern time. And there is a guy who, technically owned Wariel Hill and was so tired of all these pilgrims coming there. And he was so tired that, this thorn bush had actually become this huge, it was there was a big tree at the top of this sacred hill. And in the middle of the night, this was, I think, about a decade ago, he went on his own property, with the torch, and burned it down. And this had been here literally since the days of Joseph or Matthias, connected, like I said, when the crown of thorns hit the ground. So the people were just devastated. And he thought, like, this guy thought, finally, I'll have peace. Imagine him as like one of those like kind of curmudgeon-y old men, like, finally, I'll have peace. And the pilgrims decided they didn't care because the magic was in the land. So it didn't matter that he had burned down the tree because the magic couldn't, it was implacable. And I share this story because I feel like there are lots of little, moments like this around the Glastonbury area where, we think that magic is lost. We think that it's disappeared, but really it lives on in our hearts. And like, we can, even if you can't see it, we can recognize that magic on a heart level, on a soul level, and nothing can destroy it. So I wanted to share that little story as well.
That gives me full-on chills. Wow, thank you so, so much, Elizabeth. This has been such an amazing conversation. And yeah, well, that feels like final words, but is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap this up?
I think that's it. I feel like everything that was supposed to come through came through. And I'm just so truly grateful to you for creating this magical space. I just feel like you have such a great gift. And I just feel like there's like a huge mission, that you have with this summit. So I just feel so honored to be part of it.
You're so welcome. And thank you for being here at the round table.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wow. And to everyone watching, we will see you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.